Jeffrey Greenslate, who's been to Girona many times with us. Usually we go to Girona in groups. It's not often that we go alone, although I started going alone when I was 15 with my friend Beryl, in fact. And that was the beginning of it, but now it is more, people go there for research. They go to research the history, the mystery of the place, and also scientifically nowadays they go to do astrophysics. So they're looking into the stones and the pathways to other spheres and planets, like as in Venus. So I think if we start, just to know if anyone could just put their hand up if they have been to Girona. You've been? Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. So we get an idea, people who know it. And then I pass it over to Sylvia just to, you want to say a word about your book?
Oh, that's very kind, Patrice. I wrote a book in 2007, which was a repeat of a book in 1996, and I discovered that Patrice's book and mine were being sold together by the Saunière Society because there was a similarity. That's as much as I can say, but mine was about Rennes-le-Château, and I was thrilled to meet Patrice as a result of that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jeffrey Greenslate, who has been on many groups with us, has done a lot of research into the area of Girona. And the thing about Girona is that the mystery never seems to end. As you come to the end of something, and you think, well, that's what it's about. It's about a portal, which is big enough anyway. Then it sort of transpires other things behind that. So it's never really concluded. I haven't concluded it. I'm sure someone will follow me and probably would take it further. So Sylvia will start reading some of the bits of the book, and then I would talk about some of the events that led up to it, and then we just talk about the actual practices that go on there to some extent, and then we could have a small question and answer. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. This is from the very big. Crossed the iron bridge into the ancient city of Girona in northeast Spain. I was 15 years old, and I felt I had arrived in a place that was not of this world. It was too rich in atmosphere, the notes of its scale too high. It was magical. I still believe that today, although for different reasons, I still believe that today, although for different reasons. The people of Girona said then that the city has a mystery that pulls certain people back time and again. A city's love never dies. At first I thought the mystery concerned the matching towers of Girona and Rennes-le-Château in France, creating a golden mean, a dynamic which, when activated, revealed a gap at its midpoint, precisely at the peak of Mount Canigou. This is a portal, a gap in the planet's atmosphere leading to other places and other times. A private society has held this secret for centuries. Its power in the wrong hands would bring untold darkness. Many had sought the secret, including the Habsburgs, Howard Hughes, Otto Rahn, the German Grail writer, and the enigmatic priest Abbé Saunière from Rennes-le-Château. He made unexplained journeys to and from Girona at the end of the 19th century. I wrote about the society and the priest in City of Secrets and thought that the mystery was solved. So, back there in the late 1950s, I loved the city at first sight, and also the man waiting at the end of the iron bridge, José Tárrez, protector of his province from Franco and custodian of the private society, holder of the secret. After an illness in 2003, he gave me some of the material held by the society. He had hoped it would be made public, when the world became a more optimistic place. I understood Girona was one of 11 sites on a transforming journey under the constellation of the Great Bear. I was given a guide who took me on the journey to the portal on Mount Canigou, and I understood that activity in that space, travelling through to other realms, was the secret. For this, Howard Hughes and others had come to the area in the 1930s. I wrote The Portal, and I thought that the story was concluded. Then came mention of the stone, one of the oldest on the planet.
Thank you, Sylvia. I don't think I would have written any more after I'd finished The Portal if it hadn't have been that the Stone Cradle came into view. I'd already seen it when I was 15. It's a stone that it's one of the oldest on the planet. It is a meteorite. And I've been told by archaeologists that when it went through the meteor belt, it would have been the size of a double-decker bus. But what is there now, today, is a very elegant craft. It's rather like a fruit dish or a boat. It's blue in colour, and it has holes in the side where nutrients used to pass for people who lay on the cradle. It rocks, and it has a base that is different material to the cradle itself. The base has got lapis lazuli in the stone. At the time, it was guarded by a priest, but it was open. People would go there to the stone cradle for 4 reasons. They would go to be healed, they would go to give birth, and they'd go to die, and also they'd go to actually make connection with other spheres, other places. And the society mentioned there look after the cradle, and have done for years, and in many ways by keeping it open. It's laid open on the hill, so it wouldn't occur to you that it's going to have any value unless you were particularly drawn to it. You would say, well, that's an interesting large stone. It's big enough for a man to lie on. It was very useful in the plague times because people went there especially to be helped then. But it also had another factor, apart from healing, which it had this possibility of linking with other places. And this is why people like Jean Cocteau and Salvador Dali, Howard Hughes, and also Otto Rahn. He wrote Lucifer's Court in the 1930s. And he was a German Grail writer. And he came out there and sought for this stone along the frontier. And he thought that it was the third eye of Lucifer, which had fallen into the Pyrenees, and he was sure it was there. And I think he spent some months, maybe a year longer, looking for this stone. So, do you want to read something else, Sylvia?
This is the prologue, some of it. There were 3 men waiting at the top of the narrowing 8th century street, where it squeezed itself around the buttress and away towards the cathedral. Was it the way the light fell that made their appearance unnerving? They were silent in the deserted siesta hour as I climbed the cobble hill towards them, and instinctively I tried to look younger and fitter, as though to show I could take care of myself. It must have been the way the sun lit their faces. They stood too straight, too tense, waiting. Nearer now, I could see their expressions were too hard for what was simply an introductory meeting. The words of my last US interviewer came to mind. Don't you feel frightened doing the stuff you do? My walk was now untidy, and I considered stopping and letting them come down the hill towards me. I assumed we were going to the Lark Bar. Then I recognized Senor Macia from the second-hand bookshop. How could his expression be anything but friendly? And young, beautiful Rocca, whom I'd met only the day before, seemed not to know me. Yet he'd set up this meeting in the first place, and we were already on good terms. The other, the powerful one, I did not know, yet he was not unfamiliar. The heat was tricky, and the fact that I'd been told there would be just one man, unnerving. A mere handshake, a greeting. The smiles were there now, and then the powerful one embraced me, so putting me into the midst of the group and hugged amongst them. I was walked swiftly up the street and to the right into a short, thin passage that I didn't recall seeing before. I'd been to and fro this ancient city since I was 15. What didn't I know about the old quarter? Obviously not enough. Shadowed, private, I judged the passage to be opposite Marcia's bookshop. In a hurry now, they led me down through a low doorway into a darkened, deep-vaulted stone room. There was no choice about it, and their behaviour was swift and decided, and I was placed on a chair, and the huge walls around me came alive with light and sound. If I hadn't known of this meeting, I would have believed it had all the appearance of a kidnap. The powerful one took a seat behind a table, in the gloom somewhere in front of me. Why hadn't I been introduced to him? His manner, I thought, was familiar. The hair was different, but I decided I had seen him briefly twice in different light and very different circumstances. I thought someone called him Jip. Was this the apparent guardian of the city whom no one could identify, who travelled seemingly unnoticed through the streets? A man José described as not without a certain danger.
Thank you, Sylvia. Yeah, this was the man who looked after the society. He was the security guard, and he was definitely Central Intelligence. He had a solid police training. He used to work on the frontier, and the society used him to secure the material they kept. And he was very hard to read because you looked at him and you didn't see past the brown of his eyes. You couldn't really see what was going on with this man. What he tried to do, what he did do, was when I came to town, I was offered an interesting proposition, which I thought had to do with matching autocloths. And I was with a group of people because it felt better. We were all together and we were doing more research there. Anyway, he arranged to meet me, and it was as described there. I was more or less carried into the building and offered this role of being the female custodian, the last shepherdess. Well, I'd never heard of this before. And they said I would, have a really good life. I mean, it all sounded, pretty, it sounded wonderful. It was like I would live there, I would do work for them, I would travel there. All I had to do was learn Catalan, which I still haven't done, so that was a kind of no-starter. But it didn't feel as though this was it didn't feel like an offer, it didn't feel like a good idea at all. And do you want to read a tiny bit more?
From chapter 25.
This is the same man who...
Same one.
Yeah.
Jip was nowhere in sight. Was he out in the valley showing Dan Brown more exotic graves, or digging mine? I was sure that intercession from Ripoll had not pleased him. Why had he brought Dan Brown into this? "He's stirring you up," Anna assured me, and I thought it was time for her to go back to London to her clients. Rocca called the hotel and asked me to meet him in a nearby bar. He looked less glossy than previously, and it turned out his eyes were not blue, but hazel light brown with green flecks. The contact lenses had been for the job. He had been advised by Dali, the Dali administration, to carry on his life and not be nervous of Gyp. The more energy I give him with my fear, the worse he becomes. If I just drop him from my thoughts, he will vanish. He snapped his fingers. At that precise moment, a Land Rover thundered past the open door, filled with men and ropes and shovels, some hanging onto the sides. It had all the appearance of a Gyp Planus operation. I turned to Rocca, but he was gone. He was crouched behind the table. "Just have it," he said, and got back to his seat. Anna said it was a dust cart, and got his attention on Dan Brown and the people who would know if he was coming on Monday. He went into the street and spent more than 5 minutes calling on his mobile. He came back and said neither the mayor's office or the local press knew about it. He clicked his phone shut and recovered his good form. I didn't believe I'd get the full Gyp offering of a job story, but there was a quality in Rocca, a purity, an integrity, which I felt made it impossible to blur the truth. "Dan Brown hasn't got the story," I said. "He doesn't know the people." "Maybe not," said Rocca, "but he can buy people."
Right, thank you. I didn't have any idea that Dan Brown would have any part in this at all. I mean, maybe he doesn't have any part in it. But what the security agent did to encourage me to do the work, to make up my mind, indeed, if we were going to be in a custodial situation here, called me a disobedient shepherdess, which by then I was, because I couldn't understand. I'm basically a writer. I'm not a detective or a mathematician or I don't do sacred geometry. And so the writing was what counted, not so much what was underneath. That came for other people to do. But the thing with him, and he's a very interesting person because his obsession with the material was much greater than the whole society put together. This man was coldly obsessed. And he'd actually kind of caught this when he was working on the frontier as a policeman. And there was a light one night, with a very kind of electric light, which wasn't lightning, which took all the apparatus out of function, and so no one could contact each other. And at that time, the frontier was quite a dangerous place. There was a lot going on. And he said after that, the light came to him every night with messages about finding the cradle. And this was how it began for him. Before that, he was just a Catalan, like my friend Jose Torres, who's the guardian of the province of Girona. And indeed, he was, he's a family man. But when this came up, he needed me to make it safe for him. And I think really we came to the point where I couldn't make a decision. I didn't know what to do. It's one of those that wasn't even ambivalence. It was kind of completely not knowing which way to go. So I was sort of uncertain, although I wanted to guard the material that was there. That was a good reason to be in it. And he drove back to the group with me and he said, "I'm busy from now on. I've got Dan Brown coming Monday." And we all went into shock, and they sort of said, "Dan Brown coming Monday." And it was a really dismal set of words. And I said, "Well, he can't get the story." And then someone else said, "He can buy the story." And so, did he come? Yes, he did. He stayed in the Hotel Arts in Barcelona. Did he see Gyp Planus, as we call him Gyp? Yes. I think that was a point when I thought this is a very urgent reason to write the book, because I've gone through the story for many years. I want to write it. The cradle is so valuable. I don't think they would know about it. He wouldn't know about it. No reason why he would. And it was around that time that the cradle was actually stolen. And this was the first time in history that someone had come with a large caterpillar operation and lifted the cradle, which wasn't guarded, and taken off to an unknown place where it was kept for over a year, turned upside down as a ritual table for some organization. And it was found and returned to the place where it is now. The cradle has healing powers, it has divination, it has a change of atmosphere. Salvador Dali said it can change atmosphere, it works on 23 dimensions. So I think the thing with the society, they couldn't decide whether or not to out this material. I could see that it would sink into, well, it would sink when the people, mostly quite old, you know, sort of as old as me really, or even older, they were all going to pass over, and who was going to actually be the inheritor of this amazing material? And that question is still up today. But I think the thing with writing this kind of material was, one, fear, because I didn't know what kind of repercussions were going to come. Two, that a lot of them were much more high-powered than, I mean, they wouldn't greet you and say, well, I'm so-and-so from the government, you know, you would just meet this man and he would be very nice and friendly and Catalan, and so you didn't really know what you were dealing with. The man who did know what he was dealing with was Jose Torres, who was, let me say something about him, he's a poet, he's the conscience of the whole of province of Girona. He was an amazing person during the war with Franco and got people out. He got them over the mountains. So he's a charismatic hero. There's a lot said that he's possibly the grandson of Saunière in Rennes-le-Château, and his grandmother was the French woman who lived in the house with the French garden. This may be so, I don't know. But it was the two things as well about writing it was not to give away some of the identities because people wouldn't want it, and so to keep the integrity of the piece it was essential to put the identities into another character, and so only the people around knew who this person was. The other way was absolutely to try and tell it as it was, but remembering that I'm a writer, not a detective. That's really important too. And you want to read some more of it?
I knew I was followed, could feel it, couldn't do anything about it. Even Louis at the Ark said it would happen. I don't know what the society is, but I know what they do. Remember my father's death? It is better to go mad than to go around sane, knowing things they'd prefer you didn't. It is not a small matter. He leant across the bar to speak softer. It has to do with some other system. It's not controlled from here. Just think. People have seen the vision of the lady with the cup. Does she come from here? It has to do with the planetary system. It's not controlled in the usual way. These words, still resounding in my thoughts as I left the bar, made me unaware. Someone called my name. Then Jip pulled up in his car, quite friendly, and said I looked well. I had expected at least some serious discussion. Did he not remember Lou Doyle and his death? Did he have amnesia as well as no ingoing lines and an impossible ego? Thoughts came quickly these days. The grid men had done a good job. I should be ahead of the game and let the enemy follow. I smiled at him. All Blue Apple's betrayal forgiven. We were just two people getting through things. This life and a dozen previous ones. I did remember his words. We were in this and could not get free. I did feel a sort of kinship with him. I suggested we drive somewhere and he was all for it. I thought of the one place he always avoided. Let's go to the castle. Did he know I was trying him out? He hesitated. There's nothing to see. It was a military fort. He was unwilling, but I got in the car. It's not for you. It's not a settled place. Ah, so we were getting close. The winds are terrible there. The storms are ferocious. I assured him this was a sunny day, and so start driving. Storms just come from anywhere in that region. I said we should live dangerously.
I think something to say about Girona, that it is the place where a lot of Kabbalah was created, was unearthed in Girona. It was called the Golden Age of the Jews in Girona. That was in the 13th century onwards. Nachmanides was a Jewish scholar. He was phenomenal. There was a lot of travel. I think people always forget, I forget, that in those days people travelled a lot. They're on boats, they're on horseback, they're going far more than, as much as we are today. I mean, I think they're always stuck somewhere. They're not, they're going everywhere. And so the Kabbalists went to Girona from Leon and from different places in the south, and this was an amazing centre. And it's said that from this place, the mysticism of Girona emanates. It was closed down after the expulsion, and Jose Torres, the man who takes care of the province and has fought against Franco, he was the one who discovered it and opened up these closed walls, which have been closed since 1492, and made it into a centre, again, of Kabbalah. That was quite a big story involving Israel and America, and it was a lot of disputes, there was a lot of progress, but let's say it's ended up as a museum now, which is not saying much, because really the liveliness of the place and what was there got lost in the transaction. But there are other things about Girona, because it goes back, every time I go there, first of all they said it's 4,000 years old, and I thought, God, that's amazing. The walls were remains of the walls, 4,000 years. Then I went back again and they'd found some remnants of a being, of an animal, and that took it back 25,000 years. And then the last time I was back there, in a place in Besalú, which is near Girona, they said, well, the things back from before the Celtic tribes were there, and that would be about 3,000 years, 3,000 years ago, maybe 1,000 BC, Celtic tribes. Then the Catalans were there, and the Iberians. So there's been a long list which grows. No one is sure where the start point is. And there is a lot of talk too now that before the Neanderthal tribes were there, and during the cave paintings, that there were other intelligent races, I mean more so than us, with different forms that were living in that area, because it had very, very powerful energy. It was very nutritious. It was a golden place to live. So people sought it out. They would go there and say, yes, this is where I'm going to be. And so it's been, it seems like some people say before Atlantis, Venus comes into it always. Venus is always the point of probably no return with Girona. I think Venus is where it is. When you do the tour of the 11 sites, Venus is always an important part, along with the constellation of the Great Bear. That's the other thing. The cradle is different to the portal, and it's something they hold sacred, but they don't have it in a church, they don't have it in a museum, they have it in space, it's there. and it seems to have its own. If I described it, I'd say it had its own dimensions. It does what it wants. You know, it's a funny thing to say about a stone, but it has that kind of power, and it's said to be the interface between life and death, and souls pass through the cradle to be born here, and they also pass when they're going out again. And it links up with dreams, and if you lie on the cradle, they say you have to forego looking at life in a materialistic and established way. You have to let all that go so that another life can enter you. This was one of the really key things about the cradle. And I would say, having been there with Sylvia, we've been there, and Jeffrey and Tova and a few people, it has something, when you go there, you know it's different. You're in a place, and the old rules that applied down the road, they're somehow gone. So it's more like a childlike, beautiful place, I would say. So Jeffrey, would you like to say something about being...
My interests are in Arthurian literature, and I've read a great deal up on that. And in the course of my reading, I came across Patrice's book, The City of Secrets. And I previously read up and actually visited Rennes-le-Château. And when I read that book, I realized that here was something extraordinary. An authentic, wholly genuine account revealing an aspect of the whole Rennes-le-Château story and an aspect of the Arthurian Grail romances which no one had ever treated before. The City of Secrets really defines uniqueness as far as spiritual travel and questing is concerned. I think Patrice's great strength is that when she writes, and it can surely be no accident that a writer has been chosen to make this journey, she has this wonderful power of exposition, of description. She can take you with her on that journey, so that those of you who read her books will know that as you read the books, it's something of an initiation. You're carried along by this extraordinarily vivid and candid narrative. So I was immediately struck by this book, and I met Patrice at one of her book signings, just like this, and I asked to come. At that time you were taking people, small groups, and I travelled out to Girona, and I was able to see a number of the sites which are mentioned in that book. You then invited me back again, and on my second trip, that's when we struck this extraordinary bonanza, if that is the word, which led to this extraordinary book. And I believe you said that one time you were going to write it like a thriller, which wouldn't be trouble, because it is a thriller. It is absolutely thrilling. Right from the start, I was there to witness these events and to participate in some of them, and then was able to offer to help with some of the research and the background based on my Arthurian interests. But what I think emerges out of this for me is that the discovery out in, not just in Girona, but in the south of France and in Catalonia, of a whole, as far as most people are concerned, a whole new sacred landscape. It is, as Patrice says, immeasurably old. It's like spiritual palimpsest. It's been written over and over again by different groups of people, different races, different religions. But out there you can find an area which is quite literally alive with sacred places, sacred landscapes, places of power, which of course are still powerful today. So the whole area, which you might call Greater Catalonia, in effect, spanning the boundary between France and Spain, is an enormous spiritual resource. It's there to be used, to be visited, to be experienced today. And to travel around it, even if you don't take the sacred journey, is to be exposed to a remarkable journey of spiritual initiation. So it's there to be visited, and I think that the journey itself, a journey is a very good metaphor for this, because it really is about spiritual progress. There are many historical revelations, things that happened in history, but at the same time, the key thing, it seems to me, is that we're now in the presence of a largely hidden but valid and living spiritual tradition. The society guards something which is immemorially true and valid. And of course the fascinating thing is that we seem to have arrived in a point in time when this material, so long kept covert, is now being released or being considered as worthy of general communication, general release. So if you read Patrice's books, you can travel on the journey travel with her on the journey of the 11 sites. And these 11 sites are placed both in France and in Spain. Some of them correspond to major towns. Two very important ones are, in fact, Girona and Rennes-le-Château itself. All of these sites have qualities, and forgiveness, redemption, acceptance, reception, annihilation, preparation, and finally the entry into the portal itself on the summit of Mount Canigou. All of these sites, placed where they are, fascinatingly form, and this is something which is familiar for obviously from other sacred landscapes around the world, form the pattern of the Great Bear constellation. So this is a landscape figure on a gigantic scale. It must be extremely ancient. The progress around the sites is intended to prepare you for the journey through the portal itself. In other words, you approach these sacred dimensions with respect. Not because they are necessarily inherently dangerous, but that they're like mirrors which reflect back to you whatever you take into them. So if you have any reticence in your soul, if you have something in your shadow which may clog or hinder your progress, that will be shown to you. That will be made extremely apparent when you pass through the portal. So the whole of the journey is a very carefully graded experience to enable you to make that transition. It's been a means for centuries of welcoming initiates into the society, and if you pass through that, you may undertake a second journey, which has even more unusual and lesser known sites, and it is that journey that actually leads to the Stone Cradle. So the Stone Cradle, if you like, is the culmination of the entire progress. It's the centre of the whole thing. And that cradle, astonishingly, there are megaliths in the world which are known, and some famous stones around the planet, but this is one which has been clearly guarded and tended not just for centuries but probably for millennia, and is today the focal point of the society's activities. And associated with the cradle is this being called the Child of Light, and that being, it was said, came to earth many thousands of years ago in order to bring enlightenment to the planet.
I think I'll go with that.
So,
Thank you. Light, because in Spain it's accepted that the Child of Light is Lucifer. The Child of Light was came through crashed rather like the stone into the area of the Pyrenees and was actually rocked on that stone. And a woman from the east came to rock the cradle, and there's an effigy of her in a mountain village nearby, which has puzzled everybody for centuries, because what had an Oriental woman to do with, one, Celtic tribes, two, Catalans? But she's there. And Lucifer was the child of light, how they describe him, was a teacher, and he came to raise the spiritual awareness of the beings of that time. This is over 5,000 years ago. He was there present at the building of the first pyramid. He was said to, by legend, said to know Seshat, the goddess of measurement, psychic telling, and literature, writing, and he taught people to heal, and when he left traces of light, and these are the traces the society try and keep going. They keep the light going because it's good for the planet. The planet stays with the light that still is around. I mean, the Spanish never say, as I've heard elsewhere, that this is the Antichrist. They look at Lucifer as the giver of free will. It led to the fall. That Lucifer is banned to some extent from being near Venus, where he most apparently wanted to be, the master of Venus. They see him as a good figure in that you can go to the edge with Lucifer, you can do amazing creative work, you can think freely, and they have churches of his light, they have towers, they've got carvings, and they have rituals, and they have a guild called Luz, L-U-Z, and it was the Shoemakers Guild, and that was it was in honor of Lucifer. So this is another point that we've arrived at in the story, is the Luciferic one, and that's where we are now. And there will be a book, small book coming out about Lucifer, Lucifer by Moonlight, but this is Lucifer in modern day, with trying to work out his destiny in the darkness of this life, and it's I suppose in a way it's a channeled work, and it's an ultimate result of all that's gone before. So if you go to Girona, I think they want us to close now, so if you go to Girona, go to the old part and ask to go further north, ask for the things, because the Catalans will always give information. They're very good at keeping secrets because they don't know them and they don't care. They're interested in survival on a materialistic level, basically. They're still like that. But so if you go up there, you're going to see some amazing stuff, and really this is like a forward of it, and you'll find your own history. So thank you very much for being here, and all of you for coming, and thank you. There's more than one portal, and portals were very prevalent in mid-Europe. Sort of 300 years ago, people would go to the area of the portal because it gave up very good energy, and they would go there like, I guess we'd go to health farms, you know, they'd sit there and feel good. They didn't know it was a portal, and the Spanish had much more fear of the portal, because the portal could take you and you'd end up, you know, well, anywhere. You'd end up certainly not in the earth dynamics. You'd be over there and you wouldn't be able to get back into your body. I did do it, but I did a lot of research and work on myself before I ever went near it. And secondly, people who don't do the research and work on themselves before They go, they say, you need a guide to go with you, you need a guide who's done it, then you can go through safely. Otherwise, you don't get back into your body in time, and also you always have to come back into the north. South is death. You know, things like this. There's a lot of things to know before you ever do it. Thank you for the question. Yes. Meditation, breathing, acceptance, letting go, and starting to do the journey on an etheric level before I ever get into the place. 2, the guide will cleanse me of just about everything, and it's not pleasant. Often it is, you know, I don't like it. And that one has to deal with the ego, and one has to learn to be of service. There are many things, I mean, these are current in a lot of spiritual practices. But the main one is you learn to feel with your body the different energies. So this has to kind of go. You kind of work on the focusing, but the body is telling you where these energies are. Because if you go in near a portal which has too much energy there, you're going to just implode. And people, you know, they die, they don't come back. And so it's always a matter of choice. But by the time you've started the journey to when you reach the portal entrance, aperture, your choices have changed. You can be sure, if you never go through the portal, but you've done the work, you've done a lot. And fear is gone, it's a thing of the past. So it's a beautiful thing to do in retrospect, thinking of it. Thank you. Places, they go to Girona because Girona is the nucleus where the power is. So people go there because it's a powerful place. They can learn, they can change, and they can find a point to being alive. And it's exciting. They go there for that. Doesn't suit everybody. Some people leave running. But when you go and you find, you can ask, you can join a group and find a guide. The guide would tell you when you're ready. You ask the questions, you say, I want to do the journey. And we know, Sylvia and I know someone who didn't ask a guide and that didn't end well. So it's good, you know, to have, always have that there as a safety net. Thank you.